Welcome to the 24K Life podcast. I am your host, Derick Gant, and I am bringing Danielle a huge, she's not huge, her story's huge, okay? I don't even know how to start telling you about what she's overcome to be the dynamo that she has become, that she's turned out to be. I'm going to learn as much about her life story and her success as you will. We'll be learning a lot at the same time. I'm excited to interview her because people that overcome life-threatening traumatic events are so encouraging to me. Should be encouraging to you because you can overcome, even without the trauma, you can overcome. And for those of you that had some trauma, she's a role model to let you know that you can make it and you can do some amazing things. With that, I want to introduce Danielle to you. But before I do, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe, especially if you love her story. And then we're going to encourage you to follow her on Instagram and YouTube also. Danielle?
Hey, thanks for having me on today.
Oh my God, it's my pleasure. She's smiling. I'm nervous because I got caught up in a time trap and wasn't paying attention and missed our start moment. But she was gracious enough to bless us, bless me, and show up today, even though our time was kind of screwed up. So with that, I want to thank you for your grace and your mercy. And I look forward to hearing more and more about you. You know, when I read your bio, you know, you talk about your growth after your traumatic event. So tell us, like, what happened? Like, what was the traumatic event?
Yeah, when I was 23, I got hit by a drunk driver. And in that car accident, I sustained a brain injury. And so my world in a matter of seconds just went from, living the dream. I was, newly out of college. I was working. I was loving my life, living out in Colorado. I was teaching sixth grade math at the time. And all of a sudden, I couldn't handle focusing for more than 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. I was dealing with really severe migraines, like pounding in my head that was just absolutely relentless. And I was sensitive. The biggest thing was I couldn't handle light. I couldn't handle noise. So trying to operate in life in that way, it was impossible.
Wow.
So my world went upside down very quickly. I tried to push through it, attempted to go back to work. I attempted to, kind of just continue living with all of these issues, thinking like, oh, it'll pass. Mm-hmm. And it never passed. And a year into my accident, recovery, my neurologist said to me, Danielle, with the type of injury you've had, the body's done all the healing it will do. And at a year out, he said to me, you just need to accept this life as your new normal and learn to kind of shape your symptoms shape your life around these symptoms.
Now, how long was this at this point?
I had been a year.
So a year later, your neurologist is saying, hey, just suck it up and learn to adjust.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but I need to ask questions when they come to me because I'll forget.
No, you ask. And I glazed over that year. That year was, it was intense. I lost my job. I attempted to go back to work, but couldn't. I ended up, because I didn't have an income, I had to move back in with my family, which fortunate I was, in a situation where I could do that. And it was full-time focus on trying to get well. My mom was driving me to appointments because I couldn't drive. I would have a panic attack when I'd get into the car. I couldn't take that amount of input to, get where I needed to go. And she was driving me. We were trying all sorts of things because Western medicine had kind of fell short. They basically said, sit tight, this type of injury just sort of spontaneously heals itself, typically within a month. Then they said 3 months, and they said 6 months. And then I told you what they said after a year.
Right.
So we had begun looking at, alternative things, things that maybe aren't as mainstream. They are more mainstream now, like things like hyperbaric oxygen treatments, neurobiofeedback. I did a lot of hours in a little H-spot chamber, which you feel like you're in a coffin.
So what is it? I don't know. I know about the hyperbaric chamber, but what is the other one? What did you say it was?
Neurobiofeedback.
Neurobiofeedback. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so literally, you get hooked up to a feedback machine. So I had these those little circles that you see on people's heads with wires. It was like that. So the woman, her name was Dr. Mary Liesti. And she was working with a lot of veterans at Walter Reed. So at the time I was living in Maryland. And she was seeing a lot of progress. This is a time when brain injury was really kind of a hot topic because of our veterans and because of football players.
I'll say football, yes.
Yeah, it was like, this is circa 2012, 2013. So, 10, 11 years ago. This was all kind of coming out. The movie Concussion had just come out. Like, this was all sort of the hot topic. I remember a friend of mine, he was in med school, and he said, Danielle, like, brain injury is like the sexy new frontier. And I was like,
well, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, like, I'd rather be studying it from your end than my end.
Exactly.
It's fun to laugh at now, but it was, it was difficult. And the neurobiofeedback was really interesting because she placed these things on your brain, and she could see how quickly the neurons were like firing. And so she was able to say, like, well, your processing speed is slower. And it was. I mean, it felt like I was thinking through mud, like trying to get the words out that I wanted and responding and following conversation and, connecting the dots between things. It was really slow. And that's not normal me. I graduated top of my class in high school, top of my class in college. I performed well on average. She was able to show, like, well, yeah, because the neurons aren't firing. And so what she would do is she would stimulate, like put impulses in that would activate certain parts of my brain. And her work, of all the things that I did, I would say that gave me the most progress, but it took me maybe from like a 10 out of 10 to like an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Like pain. But it was certainly valuable. And it's something I would say, if anyone's dealing with brain injury, look into it. Because she also taught like a different type of feedback called heart rate variability, which essentially taught you how to get your parasympathetic nervous system to kick in. Okay. So how to get, because after a trauma, like I went through, you're in fight or flight. Your body is in a stress state, and you don't heal when you're in a stress state. You got too much cortisol going, and it's just, you're a mess. So, through that, I was taught how to do breathing techniques. I was taught how to meditate. And fortunately, I had a little bit of background in that. And I had been doing it before I started. Because she went, like, how are you able to do this so quickly? And I'm like, it's not my first rodeo.
Right. So she taught you those techniques as well.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. There's some really simple ones. Like, probably the easiest technique that I could teach someone to get their parasympathetic nervous system like immediately just activated. There's a lot of different breath work. I think in the West, we're becoming more and more familiar. I think it's pretty accepted now that people realize, the breath is related to the feelings in the body, the emotional state. But the yogis, they've been studying this for thousands of years. Yeah. And so the yogis, they're like past the point of like, yes, the breath makes a difference. And they're like, well, there's different types of breath for different things. And one of the, it's called the complete yogic breath. And that one is super simple. Like if you inhale through your nose and like, just picture, your abdomen filling, think about it like you've got an empty water bottle. Right. And as you breathe in, it fills up, and then the chest, and then the upper chest. And then, when you exhale, you go back the other way and you just take the water out of the water bottle. That, because it's going along the vagus nerve, it literally stimulates that, which stimulates your parasympathetic response. So it's a very quick way for someone to kind of shift themselves out of a stress state into a more relaxed state. Wow.
So you were, and I'm going backwards a little bit just because I'm curious. So you get hit. Now, are you in another vehicle, or are you walking?
Good question. I kind of breezed past that. I was in a car. It was 7:00 in the morning. I'd just gotten in the car. I was leaving from a friend's. It was his birthday the night before. We'd all been out celebrating, and I was going to meet my parents to go to a wedding. So I get in the car. If anyone knows Baltimore City, I was on South Charles Street. It's one way each way, and parallel parked cars, along it. And so I saw this car coming toward me, and he was kind of across the midline, And this all happened very quickly, but in my head, I thought, oh, he's turning, but then he didn't turn. And I thought, oh, maybe they're swerving around something, So I look in the lane, and like, there's nothing in the lane. And then I looked up at the driver to be like, what are you doing? Right. And he was completely passed out, like head closed. Yeah. And I mean, I had nowhere to go, and your response is not to turn towards oncoming traffic, right? So my response was not to go into that lane, and I couldn't turn that way because there was parked cars. So I just like hit the brakes, and it all happened in seconds. But we hit headlight to headlight, which was I mean, honestly, it was actually the best way that I could have had the impact.
Really?
Because that's how, the car is meant to take and crumple. Yeah. And so we hit perfectly for that to occur. And I mean, all the airbags went off. The car was completely totaled, but I walked away. Like, I was able to get out of the car. There was actually some runners on the street, and they came to the car. They helped me out because I was in shock. And, I just kind of put my arms up to them, and they like helped me out of the car. They were so sweet. And, some others went over to him, but the paramedics came, and they didn't bring me in because they kind of did an evaluation right there. And they said, you look fine. Everything looks fine. And I kept saying, I feel out of it.
Right.
And they said, oh, you're just in shock. You've been in a severe accident. It's just shock. And so I thought, well, I've never been in an accident before. So if this is shock, then okay.
Okay. Right.
But then my parents came to the scene, and they were like, something's off. Like, you're not normal. And so they took me into an urgent care center, and they gave the same diagnosis. They said, oh no, she's just in shock. It'll wear off. And turns out they were, they missed it. And I had, injured my brain. Yeah. Wow. Unfortunately, I didn't have a brain bleed. If I'd had a bleed, that could have been really, really a bad thing. But the trauma that happened to my brain was, like microscopic, right? It's like the myelin sheath. Because my brain hit my skull, there was just tearing that happened, which is what caused, everything to be slower and me not to be able to take in light and noise, without being overwhelmed, because my brain just couldn't process it.
Right. Wow. That is so intense and crazy. I'm sure your parents were scared out of their skull. But before we move fast forward to today, tell me about what you learned from, you talk about quantum healing, and I'm like, yeah, I want to hear about that. Anything that says quantum before it, I want to know about that.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I want to know more about that.
Well, the quantum world, it's all energy. And, everything is energy. And when you look at, helping your system to heal and get repaired, energy is a really big piece of that. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, there's a lot of tools coming out more and more nowadays that are able to tap into this quantum world and to tap into this, this energy. I was introduced to something. It was actually through an acupuncturist. She called my mom. She had been a student of my mom's, and she called and she said, I've come across something in my practice. I've never seen anything like it. And it's giving profound results with all of my clients. I think it could help Danielle. And so this is how this was introduced to us. It was something called redox signaling. Okay. And, I honestly blew it off when it first arrived at the house, because my degree's in biology. I've studied the body. I've studied the cells. And I was like, I've never heard, of these molecules, of this thing. Like, we didn't learn about it in school. And I blew it off. But my mom was like, I trust my friend. My mom's very intuitive. So she starts using this stuff. And your
mom starts using it.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Because she already had it at the house. So she's like, well, if you're not going to use it, I'm going to use it. So
Mom. She just went ahead and ordered it. Yep, I'm taking some.
Oh, yeah. Mom was like, this is the answer, Danielle. She saw it. And I was like, get it away.
I love her already. Go for it.
Mom is amazing. Always in life. She's been so many steps ahead of me that I'm like, oh, I get it now.
There you go.
Yeah. So anyways, she starts using this, and my mom had been dealing with bone on bone in her hands. So she couldn't make a full fist. And 6 weeks of using this, it's just a liquid you drink, she all of a sudden had full range of motion back in her hands. And the discomfort she had been having was significantly less, not fully gone, but significantly less. And I visibly could see, that her knuckles did like they looked better. And I thought placebo, I'm trained scientist. I'm like,
you're a scientist. You're like, that's the placebo effect.
Yeah. I was like, I'm glad it worked, but it wasn't that stuff.
We're going to put water in that bottle when it's empty and just tell her to keep drinking it.
Exactly. But my dad, he was like, time out. I've watched your mother be in so much discomfort. There's no way that she imagined herself out of that. It was so bad that when she would push the sheets off of her in the morning, she was in severe pain because everything was bone on bone. It was that bad. So my dad says, I'm going to drink the stuff. Let's see what it does for me. So 10 days into drinking it, my dad, he's always worn a knee brace. He played football in college. And
Pure stud. So you got an intuitive angel and a stud as parents. But go ahead.
I know. And I'm a beautiful blend of them both. I love it.
There you go.
And so anyway, so 10 days in, I'm walking the dog and my dad runs up to me and he's like, Danny, look. And I'm like, what am I looking at, Dad? He goes, I don't have my brace on. I was like, why not? You know? And he goes, I don't need it. And he's like, I feel like I'm 30 again. Like I could keep running. He's like, I'm rowing further than I was. He goes, I'm not tired after my workouts. He says, this stuff's phenomenal. So my dad's more analytical. So he goes and looks at the research and he's like, this stuff is incredible. He goes, you didn't learn about it in school because it's too new. It's a newer science, a newer field. And that's how they kind of sat me down and went, okay, Danielle, this stuff cannot hurt you. It might help you. Like, give it a go. So I started using it. And 3 months in, the pounding that had been relentless in my head for 2 years, we're now 2 years out from my accident, it just stopped one day. And all of a sudden, it was like I could concentrate again. I had the energy to focus. I wasn't having to nap. I could get the words out I wanted to. And I'll never forget, my cognitive therapist said to me, Danielle, I've worked with people with your type of injury for over 30 years. And she said, I've never witnessed such a rapid recovery so far out from the initial trauma. She said, what the hell is that stuff you started drinking?
It's a placebo. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, right. And I was like, I have no idea. I said, I thought it was like saline. I said, I have no idea what I'm drinking. She goes, we got to figure it out. So that conversation was the catalyst. You know, it's interesting looking in life and like seeing these inflection points that we have.
Right.
Somebody says something, there's some question asked that like puts you on a totally different trajectory. It was her. It was that question in her office because I couldn't explain it. That I went, well, I don't know. Let's figure out what it is. And ended up on a phone call with a doctor on the medical board of this company who was speaking to my therapist. And I just got to listen.
Really?
Yeah. And it was like all of these light bulbs going off in my head because he's sitting here saying like, all he asked was, well, how much did she drink and how long did it take? And I was like, you know, he was like, not surprised. And I'm like, what does this doctor know that the rest of the doctors don't know? You know, like, how is he not surprised? Like my response to this is like, people shouldn't be feeling how I'm feeling with the diagnosis I had. Mm-hmm. And then, so I listened with a different ear. And then he just started talking about how this works on the energetic level. It's all electron transfer in the body. And if you think about your body, you know, you're made up of different systems, which are just different organs, which are tissues, which are cells. And so we're just trillions of cells, and those cells have to communicate.
Right.
And it's the signal between them, which when you get into the quantum world, again, is that this is just all energy flow. The cells signal through electron transfer, which is just the exchange of energy.
Okay.
And when you drink this, it's called Redox, stands for reductant and oxidant, negatively charged molecules and positively charged ones. You add them to your system, it basically just lights up the communication. It's like if you had a light on a dimmer switch and all of a sudden you turned up, you know, your light.
Brightness. Yeah.
The brightness comes. That's what happens in your system. All of a sudden the cells can communicate like they did when you were little, and you're able to detect what needs to be repaired faster. You're able to detect mutated things. You're able to turn on what's been switched off because of, you know, stress in the environment.
Right.
So it's unbelievable. The breadth of things, like listening to this man talk, I just went, the breadth of things that this could impact is huge for any living thing, animal, plant, human.
Yeah, your mom's hands. I'm like sitting there going, okay, so in your mom's body, the cells were saying, hey, regenerate, but they weren't getting the messages. They weren't connecting. Oh. She takes the stuff and then it starts to regenerate and it helps her.
Yeah.
Wow. Is this stuff like $1,000 a sip or what?
No, it should be. I think if a pharmaceutical company owned it, it would be. And they tried to. A pharma company actually tried to buy the patents to make this back in 2008. Wow. And they were going to shelve it. And so the guy that owned the patents, when it got to negotiations, like they're at the signing table, and the company made it clear that that's what they were going to do with it. They had to shut down after the sale. And he said, I morally can't do that. Like, this is something that could change humanity. So yeah, now 14 years on, this company.
14 years. So where do you get it? I've never heard of it.
I know, because you have to get it through a rep. So because they ended up not going the pharma route, they said like this stuff won't sell on a store shelf because nobody knows what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of took the model of network marketing, word of mouth,
okay.
like Mary Kay, right? You can't get Mary Kay stuff at the store. You got to get it through a rep. Same thing. So I obviously, after it did what it did for me, I've been telling people. I mean, this is, Derick, I have spent the last 8 years, coming on 9, sharing my story and educating people about this. And like, I've helped thousands of people with their health. And it like blows my mind still. Like I still get goosebumps. I was on the phone yesterday with a guy in Mexico and he was just sharing about what this has done for him. And he's only 90 days in. And I'm like, just getting goosebumps the whole time. Man, like, it's like when you have such a gift that can help each person uniquely where they need it,
mm-hmm.
it's like, well, it's a no-brainer for people to try it, but it's so cool to see something that can touch such a wide, variety
of needs. Yeah. Well, I just threw your link up. So Danielle.teamasea.com. Is that where, can they get more information about the Redox there?
Yes, absolutely. And if you go to my Instagram, like there's info on my Instagram, my links there, all that stuff.
Okay. And our Instagram is @ Danielle Matthews _ For those of you that are driving and listening, you should reach out. I am going to go. I already knew that there was something to the Redox because I studied her a little bit, just a little bit, but I didn't know exactly what it did. But I can promise that I am going to get some, not only for myself, but I know some very close family and loved ones that suffered a stroke recently. It wasn't like a huge one. It was a minor one, but enough that they're having trouble focusing and their energy level is kind of off. And a lot of the things that you named, even about your comeback story, sounds similar to theirs. And I'm going to get some and share that with them. And if they don't drink it, I'll drink it myself.
It's like, well, my mom did with me.
Like your mom did with you, right? But I have some inflammation and some old football injuries like your dad. I had my knee reconstructed. So I definitely am going to try it for myself as well. And if I can feel like he felt, boy, I might come running next to you too when you're walking your dog. So
I know, right? Well, the cool thing too now is there's a topical, which that didn't exist back then when we had first found out about it, but the topical is more concentrated and you can tell it exactly where to go. So with a knee thing, you can rub it right on the knee, but with something like stroke, you can put it on the vagus nerve. We were talking about the vagus nerve with the breathing technique. Right. The vagus nerve runs along the side of the neck, and we see some pretty amazing things if you just rub and put the Redox and stimulate the vagus nerve with it.
So is that the recommendation versus drinking? Is to
I'll do both.
Do both. Got you. Do both.
The liquid goes internal, and then it's nice with the gel because it's faster and it's targeted. When you drink it, it goes where your body deems most necessary, which sometimes is not the thing that you consciously are aware of. So if you want to like target an area, the gel. Right.
So did you go back to teaching, or are you just telling your story and helping people find out how to heal faster and better?
Yeah, it's interesting. Life like prepares you. Every chapter you go through, it's like the step getting ready for the next step. So I found myself when I was getting better and having like the ability to hope again and dream again about like, well, what can I do if I can now work again? And I started realizing like, here I am, I've got a degree in biology. I used to teach. I know how to teach. I was taught how to teach. And I've had this incredible experience with a biotech product. And my mom, again, she saw it before I did. She goes, Danielle, you should align with this company. Like it's made for you. You get to teach, you get to do science, you get to help people. Like
right up your alley, honey.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's a placebo.
Yeah. Well, do you know what I said? I said to her, Mom, network marketing is like a sleazy thing. Like I can't be part of that.
Right. Yeah.
For a year, I'm so stubborn. It's like I laugh looking back, but we don't know what we don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
I had massive assumptions about that industry, and I think some of it well-deserved. Like there's certainly some bad stuff that goes on in that space. But when done well with a good company and a good product and good people, I don't think there's anything better. Like we all refer stuff all the time. So I finally saw the light, and I moved out of the house. I moved down to Florida, and I just decided like I had this fire within me. Like I'm meant to do this. I didn't know anything about business. I certainly didn't have a network. You know, I had been in bed and out of the world for several years. And I just said, I'm going to do this. So I Googled the word networking, and Business Networking International popped up, BNI. And I went to a meeting, and I ran into someone. He was like the visitor host or something. And I don't know how, it just like, it's amazing when connections happen. And he said, look, my wife and I do trainings every Saturday. They were in a network marketing company as well that was financial. And they said, come, like, you don't have a team around here. You're new to everything. Come, we'll teach you. You can just apply it to your world. And I showed up. I don't know, maybe he didn't think I was going to show up, but I showed up. And I showed up every day for probably 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, they taught me how to build a business. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, you are the reason thousands of people's lives change, and they gave that to me for free. They just said, look, this knowledge was given to us and we just pass it on. And you're the one that actually took it and applied it. So that's why I love to come on shows and to share like what I've learned along the way, because it's like, look, anything I can offer that can help somebody else with where they are, take their next step.
Right.
I think that's what we're all meant to do.
Well, I am certainly grateful that we crossed paths and that I got to learn about this. What stage do you think the company's in as far as the Redox? Because you said it's been out 14 years. Somebody like myself hasn't heard of it. Not that I was searching for it, but I didn't know it existed. So what stage do you think the business is in?
Post-risk, pre-momentum. So the company, I don't know if you're familiar, it's called the law of diffusion of innovation. So when a new breakthrough comes out, right, it takes time. I always think about Uber. When it came out, there were some early adopters that jumped right in. They were the first part of the bell curve. But then there's this huge gap before the masses start to jump in. Right? I remember back, I think it was like 2012, a friend of mine said, Danielle, when you land at the airport, just grab an Uber. Like, I'm not coming to get you. And I was like, the heck, I'm getting in some stranger's car. You're coming to get me.
Exactly.
And then now, right, Uber's like, done.
No big deal.
I would say that ASEA, the company, they had a lot of people that jumped in as early adopters, but there was a chasm that they have had to jump. And they're at the head of even where science is. So they're putting research forward that is moving the field of redox signaling forward. Like, there are universities that have reached out to ASEA to do research with them, because as it stands right now, they're the only ones globally that have been able to figure out how to stabilize these molecules in a bioactive form for more than like 10 minutes.
Wow.
Scientists can do it in the lab for 10 minutes, but they can't figure out how to keep it that way.
Okay.
So this is a massive field of science. So it's taken some time, but the company, I mean, they're in 33 countries, tens of thousands of people using it. And it's just, we haven't hit the momentum phase, which, if you know anything about the network marketing space, there's a phase when momentum hits where it's just like, I mean, the ball just rolls.
Right.
They haven't hit that yet, but they don't have the risk of a startup.
Okay. Gotcha.
They've been debt-free since they started, and really conservatively run, like well-run company with a lot of, they call it their ethos. Like, there's a soul you feel with the people that get attracted to work with them.
Okay. I get that. That is awesome. So last bit that I want to have you share with us is, how do you incorporate like the spiritual laws of success into your biology? Because you have a science brain, and now you have this quantum healing information, and you're like, okay, I didn't even know about that, and I'm a biology major and professional. So how does the spiritual laws come into play?
Well, for me, when I was injured, I questioned a lot. I mean, I was basically in bed, with my own thoughts. And it caused me to really ask deeper questions. I think questions that a lot of people maybe avoid asking, or numb themselves out from asking, or just don't make the time to ask because life is full. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there going like, why am I here? And what is the purpose of this? And I, over time, realized, and I really resonate a lot with yogic philosophy. I think it's an incredible science. Like, to me, Patanjali is a scientist that studied like these different religions and took the core truths from all of them and said, look, if there was one thing that, if known, would resolve all problems, it would be to understand and to realize that you are not your thoughts.
Right.
And that you are actually there witnessing them. And the moment you can disidentify and you can create space, you're going to start to be able to master your world. And so that was what allowed me to get through my healing journey. was because I didn't let my thoughts of feeling like a victim and feeling depressed and anxious. Eventually I was able to create space from them and let them pass rather than let them kind of pull me through life. And then in my business, there is so much when you run a business where you're dealing with objections, you're dealing with people. So there's always stuff that comes up. And one of these spiritual principles, right, is understanding that I'm not my thoughts. I put my ego mind fully aside, and I'm able to show up in complete presence to every conversation that I have.
Okay.
Nothing comes in that is my preference for how something should go or I think ought to go. I'm just a clean slate. Us, like we were an hour off on our time for calling. It's fine. I'm like, well, that happened exactly how it was meant to happen. I don't know why, but I trust that it flowed exactly as it was meant to.
Excellent.
So that's one principle that I always apply, and it has helped me have so much success in business because I don't get emotionally drained.
Perfect. That makes great sense. No, it makes great sense. Yeah. And therefore your energy is still good.
Yes, exactly. And another piece, I don't know if you can see this behind me.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so this is a yin yang with a tree of life in it.
I thought it was a tree of life. I didn't see the yin yang till you mentioned it, but I see it now.
Yeah, it is a favorite of mine because here's what I've realized. In life, in business, in everything, we have polarity in this world. There's dark and light, there's love and hate, there's up and down, positive, negative. And what happens, I think the danger zone that we all get into is when we start to have preference. We prefer the light to the dark. We like the positive and we don't like the negative. And the moment you have preference, you move from this oneness of polarity where it flows to a space of duality where now you've created preference. And so I like this and I don't like this. And so now I have a struggle point because this has shown up, the thing I don't like. And what do I do? And in business, stuff happens all the time, out of your control, especially if you're dealing with people. Mm-hmm. And I have learned to not get into duality, to stay in polarity and to know, you know what, things will swing equal and opposite. Just because I don't understand why this is happening or there's ebbs and flows to business. And I have just learned to stay and to learn. And so what I loved about this when I saw it is that the darkness is the roots of the tree. Because during the dark times, that's when you go inward. That's when you reflect. That's when you say, what could I have done differently? What can I do to improve this? What's the challenge making possible, right? And you learn. And then when the light comes, it's the thriving tree that we see, right? You're able to give the fruits because you put the work in to have strong roots. That's everything. And I think that principle, when applied, it's going to make life, it's going to make business, relationships, everything easier.
Everything. I mean, you should be a politician, right? Like, there's so much polarity, we can't get anything done.
I know.
Wow, that is so awesome and such a great place to like settle in and absorb that. That is awesome. I thank you so much for your time and your energy and your insights. So hold on one quick sec and I'll be right back. Wow. Did you guys see the tree? Did you see the yin yang tree with the tree of life in the middle of it? If you know anything about anything, that was so dope. That was so incredibly dope. I hope that you decide to reach out. We're putting Danielle's contact information inside of the bio. So if you're driving or if you're working and you don't get a chance to actually go check it out now, go back, check it out, click the link and check her out. I'm going to check her out. I'm going to check out the Redox even more because you know what? We all know someone that could use a miracle. And it doesn't sound like it's a miracle. It sounds like it's something we just didn't know about or understand. So I'm going to check that out. I hope you do too. Hey, do me a favor, like, share, and definitely subscribe to our channel. We're going to have you follow Danielle on her Instagram channel because I know that she's bringing so much light and polarity inside of her resources, inside of her communication, inside of the things that she's doing. Her story's amazing. Her overcoming is amazing. The fact that she was loved and cared for by family members that gave her enough space to recover is amazing. But you also have amazing things going on in your life, in your world. So you just have to step back and recognize it. I'm Derick Gant. I want you to be your best, bring your best, leave nothing to chance.